Good day. Thank you for allowing us into your educational environment. My name is Calvin Ellaby Jr., and I will be your conversation leader as we begin this conversation about blended learning. Blended learning is a relatively new concept in the educational arena, which tends to bring teachers away from the brick and mortar to allow them to use themselves and the latest technology in education, such as computers, smartboards, DVD players, iPhones, iPads, and any other tool that children can get their hands on that will make it comfortable for them to learn. Today we have with us Dr. Charles Townsell, our resident expert residing in Phoenix, Arizona, Lisa Dickman, Paula, Ms. D. Barry, Mr. Daniels, Mr. Smith, Mr. White, Mr. Cunningham, and Ms. Rush. We would like for you to join us as we begin this conversation on blended learning. Before we begin, we must also understand about blended learning. In order for blended learning to be successful, we must have a group of teachers who are trained with the tools and information in order for blended learning to be successful, and that our children will have the best educational success while they're here. As we turn forward, I would like to present to you Paula and Lisa as they begin to tell us what blended learning is.
My name is Lisa Dickman, and I am going to just give you a quick overview of what blended learning is. There are a million different definitions for blended learning. However, when you look at all of them, the thing that each definition holds is that the fact that blended learning is simply mixing different learning environments together. When I was thinking about blended learning, I thought, how can I compare this, or what can I relate, or have people relate to it? And I thought of a chocolate malt. You take ice cream, milk, and chocolate syrup, you mix it together, and it makes something wonderful. Alone, each component is good, but mixed together, it's even better. You can also take that mixtures and you can change them to meet your own individual needs. If you don't like chocolate, you can switch that for strawberries to meet an individual need that you like. That was a great comparison to blended learning, because blended learning is face-to-face learning or teacher-instructed learning, and it's mixed with computer-mediated instruction. And these two are blended together to make an amazing learning environment that is independent, it's useful, and it's ever-growing. Blended learning is teaching students with things that they use every day. Many of our students either own a smartphone, an iPod, a tablet, a laptop. In fact, as an adult, sometimes when I use those things, I have problems navigating through them. And I go to my children or my students, and they grab them and they can find me, exactly where I need to get. So they're very comfortable with these types of devices. So in short, blended learning is really then mixing familiar online delivery of education with the best features of live instruction. And it creates an amazing learning experience for children, just like mixing the three components make an amazing chocolate shake.
There are different models of blended learning. One of them is face-to-face, where the teacher is giving whole instruction, and then they either divide up into small groups where they're either teaming to do the work that the teacher wants, or they're doing small projects, or just in small groups working together. In face-to-face, there really isn't a lot. It's very little internet or online learning with it. There's some, but that isn't it. The blended learning for the face-to-face is like if they go to the library and they look at books, they research it that way, they work together, but they can do a little research on the book, on the computer. There's another one that's called rotation. This is a very diverse one because it has sub-models underneath it. And there's station rotation, lab rotation, the flipped classroom, and individualized rotation. When the children rotate, it's either in their classroom and they go to different areas in their classroom, and one of those is online with technology, and they go to different areas and they rotate that way. In a lab rotation, they actually rotate, and the teacher directs this, but they actually rotate out to a lab where that is where they do all of their online learning. And then in an individual rotation, they actually have the same in the classroom, or they can go to the lab, but each child is set up, the teacher sets a schedule because each child does not need to go to every one like they do like in a station rotation.
So Paula, so let me stop you for a minute. From what I'm hearing, it seems like everything is geared towards the student. So is this like student-centered learning?
Right, actually in the classroom it is, where they go to different stations, and there are different things. Sometimes there is technology so they can get on the computers, but there might be manipulatives for other things. There might be, like in the science that we have in our curriculum, there's flip cards that they can go through at a different station, and they spend so much time going according to what the teacher directs to each of the stations.
So Lisa, so does the different stations help reinforce what you do during a whole group classroom discussion?
Correct. It can help the students that are having problems with it, and it can enrich the students who grasp the concept, and it can go further.
Okay, thank you.
There's also a flex where most of the content and the instruction is done online, but the teacher's there to just facilitate, because the teacher really interacts on a base, like if the child needs it, if they see that they need it, more than going and directing it. They just go around and they watch and they see if the child is struggling, but most of it is online.
Okay, another one is self-blended, and that is where the student might take 1 or 2 core classes online, and the rest would be in a brick and mortar school building. The reason that they might do this is because maybe they're struggling in a certain subject, and the online course can provide them with the extra help they need, or it's they're taking it for enrichment. They already understand the basics of that subject and want to learn more. The last one is called a virtual model. I know this better as online schooling, and I was kind of confused when they had this one on there, because I thought, well, if you're taking all of your classes online, how is that blended learning if you're supposed to have face-to-face teacher instruction with the online instruction? And then I realized that even with virtual schools, students do log on with their teacher. Their teacher teaches the class. Students are able to talk with the teachers. Teachers are able to talk with the students. And in fact, students are able to talk to each other. So the teacher is at home, the students are at home, but it's still a face-to-face teacher-led instruction. So that's how that fed into the blended learning also.
I understand that in various states they are putting together a lot of virtual schools to either supplement the brick and mortar, and to allow those kids who want to be home as well, and it also coming along the lines of homeschooling, but it's virtual schooling, because therein lies everybody is face-to-face, and the teacher is allowed to more interact with the student instead of a whole class while the child is being home. So in other words, let me ask this question then. Virtual schools, then if a kid is sick, then that kid can follow along with the whole school.
Correct.
Am I correct?
Correct. They were saying that some of the things are that there is no problem with snow days. Even if the child is sick, the session can be taped, and they can, join in when they feel better. The teachers were saying that some of the advantages are you deal with absolutely no behavioral problems in your classroom, because one of the teachers said if their students, because they can click in and talk to the rest of the class, they just mute their button. And the class can run smoothly, and that it was just kind of neat to see the different things that they do with the virtual classroom. But also, a student really works at their own pace. They did say that they don't follow the grade levels like we follow. It's more of a, once one skill is mastered, they can move on to the other.
Can teachers teach parents about blended learning?
Most definitely. A lot of the blended learning, a lot of the sites that we'll be looking at tomorrow, there is actually a lot of them include ways to show the parents how to do this with your child. It shows them how to look at the data to see how the child is doing and how they're progressing with the program. So most definitely it's something that the parents can help their children within their home.
I know Erica here is aching for a question. I know she said she had a question.
So this is what I want to ask, because we have a variety of educators here. I'm trying to see, based off of what Lisa and Paula have brought to the table, can you give us any of the other individuals, describe any opportunities that you see your students have to access outside of your classrooms?
Well, like they mentioned before, self-directed learning. This is the new wave of learning. It brings up about a host of reasons why this is advantageous. Because first of all, on a municipality level, there's less dollars spent for the state to educate a student, which I'm sure the state and national governments will be more inclined to foster and develop blended learning. And it also allows the students to be self-motivated and self-directed. There are students who have interests in certain things in a certain subject that can horn in on a particular area and advance to their, and there's countless hours they can spend. And it's enjoyable, and it breeds more of a student achievement.
And it seems students have more access to technology. With one of the programs that we use, I actually get a report emailed to me that lets me know how many hours students spend on the program, and a lot of them are logging on the weekend. And so I get that report, and it'll say so-and-so spent so many hours on. And I remember over spring break and over Christmas break, I was still getting awards for my kids because they had been logging on and practicing problems. And then when we would come back to school, I would say, I know you guys were practicing over break. And they were so excited to say, yeah, we got on, and I showed my mom. So I feel, whereas those kids would have lost that opportunity for learning, now they have that opportunity, and they can do it anywhere because they may be at grandma's house or aunt or uncle's house who may have a computer, and they can get on, or a tablet or a cell phone, smartphone, where they can actually get on it. And now they can do math, or they can practice their reading, and they like it, and it's fun for them. So it doesn't even feel like work to them.
And I think one of the things it does is it removes the stigma of when children are having challenges, that for them to be able to use the blended education to work on areas where they need mastery to work in those areas, and that it's really removed the stigma from children who are seeking help.
But when I was reading about things, they did say that blended learning, there's one con kind of to it. It's really for like the self-motivated child. How do we get blended learning, like the ones that are at home just sitting in front of the TV, even though they could have got on one of those things? That's where you kind of have to find a way to get them motivated, because a child that will get on will succeed, but a child that says, well, I'm not at school, I don't need to be even on the computer for that, besides their games.
And I think where you have to find the right program.
Right.
Because once you find the right program, they'll get on it.
Because compared to their games.
But you know what? Mr. Smith will tell you how you can get that student that's less motivated, because Mr. Smith is going to tell us how to blend. When you learn how to blend, a good teacher will get that student who's less motivated. So, Mr. Smith, tell us what you have for us today.
Sure. Today I'm just focused on a lot of information that was already presented, but I'm going to focus on 4 competencies. And those 4 competencies enlist active learning, multimedia technology, classroom decor, and setting those high expectations and those realistic expectations for the students. First of all, active learning deals with actively getting the students involved, as far as getting them actively involved in their roles. And some examples are face-to-face responses, teacher presence, communication, while ensuring that the student's success is the #1 priority, but also getting them motivated through digital tests, quizzes, online projects. One of the curriculum that we have is the HEAL Connect, which they have audio and visual websites where they integrate web assessments that they can actually go online and connect. But the new trend with the blended learning is what we do for my classroom. I'll be talking about that tomorrow, is the virtual labs, virtual dissecting webinars from digital media as far as iPads, electronic devices in reference to looking at the media and looking at National Geographics, but blending that information to technology, but also making it so intense and so exciting that you'll have less room for behavior problems, so they'll be actively involved, actively engaged, and then setting up programs and software that's age appropriate, but digital media that can assess them. Because what we want to do with this technology, when we blend it in, we have multiple assessments, multiple tools of assessment. So when you look at classroom decorum, the classroom decorum is a situation where the instructor teaches good modeling, as far as where it's in the classroom. So when they get home, they have the program and the software, so they can just be at ease or individual accessibility to the software and to the information. So setting high and realistic expectations. What I mean by this is doing webinars. Some of my students, they use PowerPoints, or they email me the PowerPoint and they do their actual science experiments on using PowerPoint. So we blend that information with the science component. As I'm teaching the physical science, the biology, and the chemistry, they use digital media for enhancing pictures. They use the research-based component to tie all their blended learning information in, so they get a way around and connected. And one site we use Steve Spangler, he's a science guy, but they looked at the virtual and visual ideas of different science projects, so they get more meaningful and more blended information and background information about blended learning when it encompasses to science.
So during your classroom discussions, I'm quite sure there's a lot of the little kids in there with little cell phones or iPads that their mom gives to them. Do you see them working on their iPads and their little cell phone or other devices they use in your class to get into sciences?
Well, that's a great question, because what I try to do is every opportunity and chance I get to use social media and technology, I let them have the capabilities to do that. Prime example, we were doing a lesson on the different characteristics of mammals, and one of them, I gave them access to use their cell phones, and one of them found some information about how mammals, they don't swim backwards. I mean, because of the fins of their gills, they swim forward. So when you see them, they never swim backwards, they always swim forward. So they use the access of their iPhone to retrieve that information, which sometimes, if not monitored and not handled the correct way, then they can misuse and misappropriate that technology. But with good modeling, good teaching and supervision, and letting them utilize those social media, those tools, then we can connect and make that blended connection, especially in science.
So that student that Paula talked about, that student that's not so much motivated, now now using technology, the kid can use his cell phone or iPad. When that kid is allowed to use that technology which he feels comfortable with, do you get an increase in participation from that child that was less motivated yesterday?
Well, based on what I've read and the research talked about blended learning, they say that it decreases off-task behavior because they're so engaged and motivated, because they're so intrinsic, or they're so inquisitive about learning about that information that it captures their interest. So it decreases off-task behavior, it decreases motivation, and also captures their attention. So it actually eliminates unwanted behavior, because we're in a social media, social era, where they're either Facebooking, texting, iPads, tweeting, Instagram, social cam on all those different social media devices.
One thing that I saw that Mr. Smith did that worked really well is he had, instead of just doing regular oral reports in the science class, he had students tape their oral reports with the phones. And so even though it was something that happened in class, then they shared it with other students. And so the education continued even outside of the school time.
So Lisa, with your fifth graders, how do your fifth graders react when when they're allowed to use their little cell phones or their other little attachment? Do you see like, Miss Bush, look what I got, Do you see that going on in your classroom?
Well, honestly, not many of the fifth graders have cell phones, but a few of them do. And it was interesting to hear that one of the parents said that on their iPhone, they had the IXL app, and they didn't know how they got it, but the student found it important enough to take their parent's phone, put the app on, and use their parent's phone to do it. And another parent was saying how car rides are quieter now because she actually has her 2 children involved in IXL and things like that on car rides, which is a perfect opportunity, of which is usually a time that can be very dull, and that the kids are taking time and using the different apps. So for the fact, to answer the question, if we use a lot of our iPhones, not many of my students yet do have smartphones or phones that we could use in the classroom, but I think that's more in high school that maybe they're allowed to carry the smartphones.
Well, I have several students who have asked to bring in their tablets and their nooks because during reading for one of our centers, they have to practice their fluency. And so one day I had one group just use my tablet to record while they were reading. And it just kind of got, just kind of took on with them. And so they said, well, Miss Mangum, can we bring ours? And then can we practice our fluency too? And so I would let those groups go out in the hallway and then read and record so that they can track their fluency, and they can't wait to do it. And I don't even have to bring my tablet anymore. They bring theirs from home to practice their fluency.
And what she's referring to is those multiple assessments, those different ways of not only as a teacher or educator grading, but the students are getting involved in an assessment. And I say that because I did an activity where I had the students record their presentations of doing their science experiments, and then I had them do a self-assessment. So they went to each science project and they critiqued using the rubric that I created, but they became the teacher, and that was self-evaluation, self-assessment gave them that more leverage to get more involved in their multiple assessments.
And even in the younger grades, they might not have the tablets and the iPhones and stuff, but we have those learning centers that have the tape recorders in them, and at the younger grades they would like to just play with the tape recorder and read, and then that's something big for them, like in the kindergarten, first, second graders.
Mr. White, so how do you blend over there in your room?
Well, we blend when there's a problem in a math concept. Instead of the time running out in the classroom, students then are directed to go to iExcel. iExcel is a universal program that we have here that engages the students, and they operate it at their own rate, and whatever the concept they're not grasping, they then spend time trying to figure out. One of the beauties of iExcel is that if a student get a problem wrong, and which I'll be sharing with you tomorrow, is that they show the student how a mistake that they have made. And then the student goes back and try again. But this is something that we have an ongoing process.
Do you like it when it allows you to, what we call it, guided intervention? Does that work for you when you blend it?
Yes, it does. See, it allows me, as we get a weekly report on how much time is being used in the programs, and then that gives me an opportunity to share with the students that the reason why their grade is this or that or the other is because of maybe a lack of use or something that they may be doing wrong. We spend time in the lab and we see how some students are having problems with certain concepts. Then I get them in small groups, and studies have shown when students are in small groups, students learn better than just whole teaching concepts.
Ms. Beavers, when you're considering blended learning, what do you consider?
I would consider taking the face-to-face module and tying in a technology component, because that's what the 21st century is coming to. So preparing them for tomorrow's future. And then some of the resources that can be used within the classroom would be the iExcel, the MyAccess, Cheetah 3000, A to Z Reader, numerous resources that can be tailored into the classroom, the Khan Academy, which just takes their education outside of the school so they can work from home. If they're going on vacation, they're going to miss school, they can do those assignments that way. I like the fact when Lisa had brought up the almost like Skyping, where you can still see the teacher and get your instruction. I know I did that with the iPad the other day. I had like 4 students go on a website, and then I went into a different classroom and I FaceTimed them and taught them that way. So that was pretty cool, and they were like, you can really do this, I can still see you. And I was like, I still have eyes behind my head, so I know what's going on. But they just don't think of stuff like that. But even though I'm not in a classroom, I'm still aware of what's going on. So I think technology is just a valuable asset, and we just need to use things that's going to gear and motivate the kids so they can learn and want to learn and be successful. Because I think we're moving away from pen and paper, and everything is being tailored through electronics.
Do you use an assessment to help you assess your kids? when you take in consideration what you would use in your model of blended learning?
Almost like running records, what was previewed the last session we had with the fluency check, having the student read and then see if they had any errors, and then have the student make sure that they can do it with another student so it takes me away so I can watch everybody else, and now they can do what I do with them, and then they can see the mistakes that they make and then tie it into their writing components, and then that strengthens their writing skills as well. So I think all assessments, creating your own rubrics, and then you know the criteria, and then tying in the Common Core standards, and make sure that things are aligned with that, because that's what we're moving towards too.
So when you consider a lesson plan, do you look at the Common Core strands for literacy?
I think that's what drives the instruction overall. So yes.
Ms. Magnum, how do you feel about the considerations?
Common Core, also, you have to know your class. So you have to make sure that you're using formative assessment so that you know which groups need what and how you're going to differentiate that assessment. Because even though you're using blended learning, you have to make sure that it's being tailored to the needs of your students as well. And all within the umbrella of the Common Core, just to make sure that you are addressing the needs of your students.
Mr. Smith?
And just to add to that, when they're talking about knowing your students, they also focusing on the classroom decor, the environment of the class, overall makeup, because you can have all the technology, you can have all the resources, but if there's no structure and there's no relationship to connect to the students with the blended learning, then you just have chaos. So it's also important that you have space, the lab techniques as far as the classroom arrangements. Also with that, you have to understand that sometimes the lessons that you plan don't go as planned. So what you have to do is make those adjustments. And with technology, sometimes technology fails, so you have to have that backup plan to have something that will supplement their learning. Where it might be a situation where they might have to go to the computer lab instead of working on their iPads at that particular time because there's a technical difficulty or something that. It's always important that you have a backup plan or have something that can coincide with that blended learning. And I just said that by setting your expectations high, setting your rules and expectations high, will always get them to reach that mark. Even if the blended learning does not go as planned, your expectations are high and you have a schema or a routine in place.
Ms. Dewberry, as it relates to consideration, do you consider the different pacing of the students when you do your blended learning planning?
I would have to, because if I didn't take that into consideration, how would I know where they would be? And then also, the curriculum also gives you a self-pacing guide, but I don't necessarily use that because my students may not be at that point. Like I know for fractions for the month of April, I should have been there, but technically I didn't get there to like May 7th. So I think you just have to go with where your kids are and then let it run its course from that point.
Is that a key importance that we should be aware of? Pacing?
As we move forward, I would say yes.
And then also we have the MAP test, which gives you a good snapshot of where your kids are and what they're able to do too. So for example, my kids tested minimal in math, like across the board. So they were 2 years plus behind. And we didn't get past Unit 2, but when I met with the math liaison with MPS, she told me don't worry about it because as of winter, they had made so much growth that they even surpassed their targets, but they still weren't where they were supposed to be. So she told me to just keep up the good work, and we were only expected to maybe just touch on fractions for them. But, so I still have to continue with the rigor, but it was okay that their pacing wasn't what the book said because that's not where they were. They started in 2 and 3 years behind. So the most important was to keep them growing, to make sure that we did close that achievement gap.
Do you believe that, one second, Mr. Smith, do you believe that blended learning, allowing the use of all the tools and information that is available?
Yes, I believe that blended learning is what helped them meet those goals. A lot of them did meet their end of the year goals, and I have I excel in then just differentiating their instruction to thank for that, because it did allow me to go in and look at their scores and see where their weaknesses were, and then I could go into iExcel and assign them those strengths, and they could get that practice, and then I can start them in at the 2nd grade, and then when they mastered it, I could bump them up to the 3rd grade, and then I can bump them up to the 4th grade, and then I saw that growth as they progressed from the winter and then to the spring math scores.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
I just had just a general question. I guess when Mr. Madden was talking about pacing, I was talking to a colleague yesterday, and we were talking about moving our students, and he was referring to math, Nick, and he was saying that this year he didn't go as paced as he wanted to, and I was feeling the same experience. So we were talking about, were we on target? Did we meet those goals? Because we didn't finish the book, did we meet those needs? Were we on schedule? And that's just a question for the table. How do we incorporate that pacing with the blended learning to see if we have met that goal or objective?
Well, coming soon is my understanding that with the new Common Core, there are strands and targets they want you to hit. While you may not go from chapter 1 through chapter 30 in a book, there are certain elements that they want you to hit so the child can be college and/or / career ready. So at each quarter of a school year, you should then look at where you at as far as your curriculum in your classroom and see whether or not you have met those targeted quarter targets under the Common Core standard, because that is key in math and literacy this coming year and going forward. The new standards for social studies and science are coming up, but they have guidelines. So you have to see those guidelines. So with the blended learning, listening to what Paul and Lisa is talking about, and the consideration that Ms. DeBarry and Ms. Magnin is talking about, when you guys go to blending, you can see what you need to do based upon the Common Core standard. And you always have to be aware that there are targets you have to meet each quarter. So because your book got 30 chapters, it doesn't mean you are a failing teacher if you don't hit 30 chapters. That is not the goal. The goal is making sure that the child is college ready at a certain level throughout the 180-day school year.
So my question would be, then with blended learning, it's great and everything, but when you do get the student that is maybe 2 years behind in math or in any subject, reading, math, or whatever, how does blended learning play a part? Because you really have to say, they'd have to, just be blended learning, just to catch them up to what you want them to do, like in 5th grade. So how does blended learning play a part with the kids that are that far behind?
I think the main part that blended learning plays is that a lot of times if I'm a 5th grade teacher and I'm getting a student who is at a 2nd grade math level, the problem is, how do I take the time to work on the 2nd and 3rd grade, 4th grade stepping stones so they can get up to the 5th grade level? With blended learning, I can start then at a 2nd grade level. We can all be in the same room together, and someone can be working on a 2nd grade level, some kids be working on a 5th grade level. Nobody needs to know. They're all working on their own level, and it's letting them hit those marks that they have to hit to be successful in the 5th grade math program. A lot of times, before when we just did all group instruction, if you had a student who was 2 years behind, they were just expected to miss those stepping stones and jump ahead. Now with blended learning, we can really focus on each individual student and make sure that they have the building blocks or the foundation that they need to be college ready, to be career ready. Where before we just, thought everyone learned the same, everyone should be doing the same, and they'll just miss those, but they'll still be able to hit the targets in 5th grade, which was, if you think about it, absurd that there's no way a child could do that.
Now it frees you up to let them work on their skills, and now you can pull that student for that one-on-one intensive intervention where you couldn't do that before because you were engaged in whole group instruction.
Exactly.
I was going to say, with an individual education plan, a student being 2 years behind can have a goal, set a personal goal, and other students it can be in camouflage, and other students won't learn where this student is. And with a plan of action, that student may not be able to catch up with the rest of his peers, classroom peers, but gains would certainly be made. And I think we'll be fooling ourselves as educators to think if a student comes in with a 2-3 year deficit in math, English, or reading, to think that we're going to do something magical to get them up to the standards where they are, I think we're fooling ourselves. But if we can get them motivated, as you always say, to have these small experiences of successes that will motivate them over a period of time. Because when you look at a 5th grader, when is a 5th grader going to be college ready? We're looking at least 10 more years virtually, no less than 10 years. And so trying to reinvent the wheel, I think the students need to be where they are, and we need to coach them along and to give them what they need. Because every particular strand doesn't require mastery. Some requires just familiarity, and this is one of my goals that I try to do in math. I don't expect mastery in every concept, because in algebra alone, there's 259 concepts, and every student is not going to be proficient in all aspects of this particular concept. So it's our goal just to motivate.
And now when you think about it with IXL and stuff like that, they can do it at home. They can make some gains, a good gain if they do it at home and practice.
I just have a question for you all. As educators, how do you all feel your students have benefited from blended learning?
I think one of the main benefits is having worked in the university level as well, seeing the blended learning preparing them for college instruction, using some of the similar tools here on our campus and with the Institute, seeing those same tools used across the country makes it students that much more prepared just for not only learning, but learning the tools so that they continue to learn.
And I think at an elementary level, just like we said, filling in those steps or filling in those holes that they were lacking. I mean, some of the stepping stones are so important for the next step that if they don't have that, you know, they're going to fail all the way through. So the feeling of success and the feeling that they can do it, I think blended learning is...
It increases ownership, so it makes them more accountable for their own learning. It makes them just interested in things, and they just approach it with open eyes and open arms, whereas you may have students that really didn't care before.
Like, I have a student who just didn't want no part of the computer, and because he didn't feel as though he could type fast enough. So today when I put everybody on their own individual iPad, and I kind of watched him because he just kind of pushed it away, and then I give it back to him and he pushed it away. And then finally I said, well, why don't you put your login name in? And he was like, I can't type. And I said, well, you could just peck at it as long as you get your login in. Then once he saw the vivid colors and things jumping out at him, he was gravitated to it. And then he said, this is what my mom does when I get home from school, because she goes to college online. So I was like, well, you consider yourself in college right now. You're online taking this class. And so, like, he's asking me tomorrow, are we going to have the iPads again?
See, that's one of the key benefits, Ms. Rush, about blended learning. If you take a look on the board, you see that the different aspects of blended learning is that you increase the motivation of the child with the various techniques that you're using to teach a kid. If a kid knows that they can go grocery store shopping with mom and get on mom's phone and learn math, they're doing good. If we get past the library, mom, I go to the library, because sometimes you have those kids who never go to the library. But now I went to the library. What's at the library? Various things I can learn. I can go to the library, I can put in the tape, and I can, hear my book and hear a story. I can go to the library and, before I didn't want to go to the library to look at the other thing because I didn't know what they were doing. But now I'm very active now, and that's when you see that kid now becoming college ready. That's what the new standards are talking about. Is the child looking forward? Is the child looking forward? If the child is looking forward, the child is college ready. Because the child is now visioning something. The kid is now seeing something. And now not attached to not just a brick and mortar, virtual learning. You know, all these different various technologies that this kid now can realize, I can learn. I can learn just like everybody else. Granted, I'm not at the level that I should be with my other colleagues, but they don't know that. The only person knows that is me and my teacher, who now has the ability to guide me and intervene and to set me up and put me back on the pace where I need to be at.
And just to add to that, the biggest thing that blended learning incorporates when it comes to is exposure. Exposure to a variety of things. And I said that to say I took a group to Chicago and we looked at the different simulators, the modulated city, the heart, the components, the infrastructure, the tornadoes, that the exposure to blended learning, and then incorporating that to your in-class learning or your face-to-face. So blended learning allows you to have exposure and variety.
Okay, now this just one last thing, okay? Because we have kind of dug into actually what blended learning is. If you could describe blended learning in a word or two, tell me what blended learning is. Fun.
A few more words than a few words. From the traditional, I would say from the spectrum, blended learning is no longer brick and mortar, but it's in the middle, and the other spectrum is home. And so it's somewhere kind of gravitates towards the middle. You know, it's not the brick and mortar, it's not home per se, but it's in the center of the spectrum where children are in their own little universal world of learning, and it's not at home per se, it's not at school per se, it's wherever I am.
Okay, variety and multimedia technology.
21st century.
Engaging.
Personable.
Hopeful.
I was going to say engaging too, but individualized also.
Guided intervention.
Well, we want to thank you all for this time, for this wonderful look into what blended learning is.
Thank you very much for joining with us this evening. We hope you heard enough that has fed you into engaging yourself in your child education, as well as teachers looking forward to teaching a different way to a new, different child. Thank you very much.